We're to Paul's third argument, and his third argument is that faith, hope, and love abide longer than the miraculous gifts. We see the priority of the gifts first, so this is our third argument. It's an a fortiori argument for greater cause. We've covered a fortiori in the both in the logic class and in the hermeneutics class, both. So, Chris, would you read 1 Corinthians 13:8 for us and translate it for us, please?
Yes. He agape ou depote ek pepete iete de prophetai kata regethe sontai iete glossai passantai ete glossus kata regethe setai. I translated that as love never falls away, but if prophecy, it will be done away. If tongues, they will cease. If knowledge, it will be done away.
Okay. I want you to notice the King James before we make any more comments. It has the word charity, which technically is not wrong, but I think it's misleading. I think it leads people to think that this must be a different word than the word love. And so the American Standard has love, but the King James also has another difference. I think they tried to be more poetic in the rhyming and all. And again, technically they're not wrong, but I think it's not a good translation from two standpoints. The word charity, I think, is not a good word. And we'll see, if you study the word charity, it doesn't really mean the same thing as love, okay? Now, if you have love, you will be a charitable person. Now, but notice the King James says, prophecy shall fail, tongue shall cease, and knowledge shall vanish away. But I notice that you didn't translate the prophecy is failing and the knowledge vanishing away. You didn't translate them differently. Why didn't you?
For it done away?
Yeah.
And the other done it well? I mean, they're same, pretty much the same word. It's the same word there.
Same word. They're just different number. When I'm saying that was plural, that's the only difference. They're both the same verb. So the American Standard had them both being done away. Now, I know the King James is probably rhymes better, has got more rhythm to it, and it sounds better. But I think, again, someone who is reading the King James will think, well, these are different words because they are in English. And if they don't look at it and study it out more carefully, they'll probably draw a conclusion. I heard people say in comments in Bible class, well, they're different words, so there must be some difference in meaning. But that's unfortunate. The translators kind of messed up in my judgment. That's my opinion. I think the American Standard is better. I think yours was a good translation. I think the word charity is not a good word either. If you define the word charity, I think you'll find that it doesn't fully carry the full thrust as the word agape love. Now, there's something else about this. What voice was pasonta?
Future.
Tongue shall cease.
Future middle.
I have verb, future middle. Yeah, indicative.
It's middle voice. The tongues will bring themselves to an end. Ah, interesting. Remember, the future has a different form for the middle and the passive. Both future and aorist do. And so we know it's not a future middle passive form. It's strictly middle. And so they'll bring themselves, they'll cause themselves to come to an end. And that gets into a study of tongues, and we'll get into that in the 14th chapter. So we'll get into that a little more. Maybe we can see a little more how that happens. Is that any comments there? Anything there? Anything you want to add?
I am interested in some of the translations I looked at, done away with, fail, that sort of thing. The word also means abolished. Would you have any problem with translating, but whether there are prophecies, they will be abolished?
Probably not. They will fall powerless. They'll cease to be manifested, or people will cease to prophesy. Something will bring them to an end. That's passive voice. They'll be brought to an end. But let's see, the prophecies and the knowledge will be brought to an end. They're passive. Most never passive voice. Let's see here. Okay. Never fails. That's present indicative, active. But be prophecy, they should be done away. That's future indicative, passive. Now remember, the future has a different form for passive and middle. And if you notice, then the tongues will cease, and that's middle voice. Tongues brought themselves to an end. And we'll consider that in 14th chapter, verses 21 and 22 when they come to them. We'll see how that come to be. All right? Will there be knowledge? And this is what kind of knowledge? What do you think it is? Is it miraculous knowledge?
I would think so, because it's going to be done away with.
It's miraculous knowledge will be done away. That is, people won't miraculously know things anymore at some point. Okay? And again, that's passive. It'll be brought to an end, but the tongues will bring themselves to an end, middle voice. Now, let's go back to 1 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10, that we went through, I don't know how long ago, a month ago, maybe, nearly. But it might have been even before. It might have been last year, right toward the end of the semester. I don't remember exactly when we did this, but we found that when I translated it, I said, but these ones give the manifestation of the Spirit to the bringing together of things, which indeed are given through the Spirit, the word of wisdom, and to another, and the word of knowledge, according to the same Spirit. In verse 9, notice the footnotes I have here, and this is another of the same nature, another of the same class in verse 7. And then we come down, but to another of a different group. And this is heteros. We have allos, and heteros coming into play here. And so we had three different categories of these gifts. They were put into three different categories. And so the first category was the word of wisdom and the word of knowledge. And then you have a different category in verse 9 introduced. The second group would be faith, and that would be miraculous faith, the mountain-moving faith, by the same Spirit. Another, again, this is allos, this is another of the same nature, a gift of healing by the same Spirit. To another, this is another working of miracles. This, again, is the same word for another. And another, prophecy, and to another, discerning of spirits. Then we get into verse 10, we have a third group, and this is a different group, and that's the word heteros. So a different group, various kinds of tongues, and another, this is of the same group. So the last group has two things in it, tongue speaking and interpretation of tongues. Now, the most prominent greater gift for each category is singled out and said to be brought to an end. Group 1 was miraculous knowledge. Group 2 was prophesying. Group 3 was tongue speaking. And so he comes over into chapter 12, from chapter 12 into chapter 13. He has those same three categories, and those are the three categories that are going to end. So when the greater gift, let's see the argument, a fortiori argument, if the greater gift is not to continue, remember what's true of the lesser is true of the greater, and by contraposition or transposition, what's not true of the greater is not true of the lesser. Remember that? So
Yes.
if the greater gift was not to continue after the coming of that which is perfect, then the lesser gift will not continue after the coming of that which is perfect. And of course, then he argues in chapter 13, verses 8 and 9, I guess, that the greater gift was not to continue after the coming of that which is perfect. Therefore, the lesser gifts, which he did not enumerate, because he just chose the greater ones, they would not continue. So this, therefore, takes care of all categories of miraculous gifts which cease. Does that make sense? Any question?
That makes sense.
And of course, we have to use our fortiori principle. It's a powerful line of argumentation. Of course, it's based on logic. Okay. So the greater gift of the three categories is said to have been done away. Therefore, the lesser gifts are done away or done away by a fortiori principle. All right. So I translated this: love never fails, but whether it be prophecies, they shall be done away. Whether it be tongues, they shall cause themselves to cease. Whether it be knowledge, it shall be done away. Pretty much, almost what Chris said. Pretty much, pretty close to it. Any comments or questions about that? I think commentators have missed the three categories of chapter 12. All right, I think that's what they've missed. And these three categories, and then we see how that the greatest of the group, of course, prophesying was the greatest because it's listed first. And so we see that. And tongue speaking was mentioned, and I believe it was mentioned first. I believe the order they're mentioning would show which one's greater. All right. Any questions or comments before we move on to verse 9? Now, he's going to continue this and make another basic argument. Okay, verse 9, if you would, James, please.
Ek merus gar genoskomen kai ek merus prophetuomen. And I translated that, and we understand in part, and we prophesy in part.
We understand genoskomen. Now, this is elementary knowledge, not epigenosko. So that's understanding, to have knowledge, to know, in part or out of the part. See, it's ek, from the partial. It emanates from the partial. And then we prophesy out of the partial, ek, out of the part. And so the expression out of the in part or out of the part, literally, is indicating that the part was the source from what they knew. It'll be brought up in verses 10 and 12 later. Next two verses, 10, and then skip verse 11 and brought up again in verse 12. It's also brought up, it was brought up in chapter 12, 27. Now, your body, Christ and several members, ekmeros, members thereof are out of the part. So how did you translate that again there, James? I'm sorry.
I recognize that it used ek, but I translated it instead, and we understand in part, and we prophesy in part.
Well, you got a lot of scholars on your side. Okay. So
Okay.
I don't think it's wrong translation. I just went ahead with the literal out of the part. Okay. Out of the part.
Yeah, I thought in English it was a little sticky to go that way.
All right.
As far as somebody reading it and understanding what you're trying to tell them.
Well, I'll give you an A+ anyhow. When I went in the Navy, I scored an A+ on one of my tests. And they come back and told me, well, your blood type is A positive.
Oh,
That's not funny. Okay, sorry. Okay, First Corinthians 13:10, if there are no more comments. All right, Chris, if you would, verse 10, please.
Yes. Hotan, de, elthe, to, telion, tote, to, ek, marus, kata, rege, the, setai. I have, but when that which is perfect is come, the thing out from the part shall be done away.
Now, where is the word perfect? The word perfect is an interesting word. Remember that English is a living language, and the words tend to change meaning with time. So I bought a dictionary. My younger sister she was struggling financially to get through college. She wanted my Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary because she needed it. She was a couple of grades behind me in college. And so when I was a senior, I gave it to her. I thought I didn't need it anymore. I was about to graduate, so I just gave it to her. And then after I graduated, a book salesman come by, and he had these dictionaries. And I said, well, I'll take it. It's a 2-volume set, and I bought it. And I've used it. It's real good. It's got real good references. And it was 1964 copyright. So this was 65 when I graduated from college. So I believe the dictionary was 64 copyright. Well, the definition that they had for perfect in the dictionaries, the first definition is the most prominent, and they go in order down the scale. And so the very first definition was mature or full grown. But if you take Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary now, it's down about the 6th or 7th. And the word perfect means without flaw. See? So the word has changed meaning since 1964, when that dictionary was copyrighted, see? So it's changed. So the word perfect is not a bad translation, but the English word perfect has changed meaning on us. In 1964, it was very good. It's still correct, but it can mislead people because of it being way down the pecking order of the definitions. Am I making sense what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, so you like maybe mature, full grown, or something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Notice at the bottom of the screen right now, we have Thayer. And what we have here, I have several of these Greek authorities. And it's finished wanting nothing necessary to completeness. See? And so it doesn't lack anything to complete it. And then it says perfect. And again, Thayer was written around 1900. So the word perfect back then really meant complete, or we had everything you needed. We have Souter or Souter, S-O-U-T-R. I found this little lexicon. It's a small pocket type lexicon. It's pretty brief, but I found it and I got it for about 50 cents at a used bookstore. So I kept it, and it's got some good stuff in it. It's been well worth 50 cents. But from Telos, this teleos is our Greek word. Teleon is a accusative form of it, and it's neuter, of course. It's nominative, singular, neuter, masculine, nominative, singular, neuter, and accusatives or singular, masculine, or nominative, singular, neuter. And it's neuter here because of the article, so I know it's neuter. And so telos is the final end of something. It's full-grown, mature, complete. Again, Souter has a pretty good definition. And of course, then we have Metzger. He wrote a little later, but again, he's got a good definition, meaning the end of something. Like telos is like a telescope or a telegram or telephone. And the telos is prefix at the beginning of it, say at the end or something. And once it gets to the end, it's finished, it's fulfilled. So again, to make an appropriate end, and that's Metzger Moulton. That's an analytical lexicon brought to completion, fully accomplished. See, these are not without something without flaw. Now, I grant you, if whatever this is could be without flaw, and we'd have to decide that too. But this is not the main thrust of the teleos. It's not the main thrust of that word. And of course, I have Bullinger here. My father, he goes on and defines it, and Nunn does too. Any comments there? I could add some more. If you have my volume 2 of the Work of the Holy Spirit, I'd devote a whole chapter to this, to that which is perfect, because it's a very important point when you deal with Pentecostals. Okay? So dealing with them, teleon is a neuter adjective. See, it's neuter. And we know it's neuter because of the neuter article, which I'll highlight right there. Okay, so it's neuter, and it's neuter adjective. Adjectives agree with the substantives that they modify in gender, number, and case. Davis. Summers says basically the same thing, and Vine says the same thing. I gave three quotes here for a reason, because this becomes a question. So what is that which is perfect? What is the perfect? Because it's neuter gender, whatever it is. Now, we'll get into some questions about it, but whatever it modifies has to be neuter gender. It can't be masculine or feminine. Now, so that's the rule. I gave 3 different quotes. I could have added some more authorities to say the same thing. But all your Greek authorities say that it has to be, because this adjective, it agree with the substantive. Substantive is a noun or anything that acts like a noun, that it modifies in gender, number, and case. So right here, whatever it is, it has to be, if we look back up here, there's a nominative, singular, neuter, a masculine case article. It's a neuter, nominative, singular. Okay? And so the perfect, whatever it is, has to be nominative case, which would be the subject, and it could be elliptical. Okay? That's no problem. It has to be singular, and it has to be neuter. So singular, number, neuter. That's what it has to be. Okay? Singular, neuter. And it will be the nominative case, of course. Now, so it said, but when that which is perfect is come, then, see, so then at that time, that which is in part shall be done away. So it's going to be brought to an end. Passive, see, it's passive. It's going to be brought to an end. We know that the thing that was out of part will be done away when the whole comes. Now that's kind of clear cut. It's a gnomic or almost an evident truth. See, gnomic is something that's kind of like it's almost like a proverb, a proverbial truth. When the complete or full grown arrives, the partial ceases. And I've heard preachers over my many years of sitting in the pew as a young lad, and I attended from the time I was born, the Lord's Church. And whenever I heard one preacher after another use an illustration of a scaffolding for a house, or you're going to build something, and you put a scaffolding up, and then when you get it finished, you take the scaffolding down. Or someone would use a form like concrete, and when the concrete dries, they take the form out. And so this is something, the scaffolding, the part, would be done away. And so when the complete or full grown arrives, the partial ceases. Whatever the partial things are, they related to revelation, confirmation, canonization, dissemination of the will of God. That is, I believe the New Testament scriptures are this very thing. They had to canonize the scriptures, the will of God. I discuss it in chapter 9 of my volume 2, The Work of the Holy Spirit. Now, let me say this. That which is perfect, and we're not going to spend a great deal of time on it here, but that which is perfect can't refer to several things. James talks about the perfect will of God, and that won't work because the word perfect there is masculine gender. Okay, so it can be that. I think when the will of God was perfected or full grown, we can have that. But in part, and I would encourage you to read my chapter, and we can come back to it next week if you like. If you have my book, I would encourage let's study it and come back to it next week. All right. Any questions or comments? All right. He's going to go on. I think this will help us a bit here in verse 11. Let's go ahead and translate verse 11. We'll come back to this next week, okay? And deal with it in maybe the whole class, okay? Verse 11, if you would, James.
Yes, sir. Hota emen nepios, hos nepios, elalun hos nepios, ephro nun, hos nepios, elogi zomen, hota de gagona aner, pater geka, tatu nepiu, excuse me. And verse 11, I translate it as, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, I considered things as a child would. When I became a man, I put away the child.
Okay. All right. I think that's a good rendering. So when I was a child, now, what kind of a word is the word child? What is it really saying? You can see it on the screen here. It's a minor child, and somebody has to make his decisions for him. Okay, and so this is whatever this is compared to one being a minor child, right? Then I spake as a child. I had to have someone to guide me. Okay, so I had to have this guidance. So whatever this is, it entails guidance in some sort, okay? And I felt my thinking was as a child, I was thinking it's imperfect as a child, as a minor child, minor, one who can make his own legal decisions. I was thinking as a minor child. I felt my feelings, my way of feeling or thinking, understanding. And then I thought processes were that of as a minor child. Somebody had to take me and guide me because I didn't have this maturity. So, all right, but now would be when the perfects come, say. So in the past would be the miraculous gifts, but when I became a man, now the very standard says now, that I have become a man, have become, that's your perfect tense, has come to that point. Now, a man is on air, not anthropos. And so this is a full-grown man rather than a boy. And notice what he says here. It's reference to sex. It's not a woman. So it's a distinguished man from woman, but a male or a husband. Now, Arden Gingrich says a man in contrast to a boy. Other sources will say the same thing. The contrast between a man and a boy is aner versus nepios, right? And so it's a full-grown man, a mature man. Again, this fits in. When the perfect come, it's going to be maturity, right? And I put away what? childish things, and it's not childish in the sense that people want to take it to be. It's things doing with relating to a minor child, not being able to make my own decisions. You know, a boy might not be totally childish. He may have make some good decisions when he's 5 or 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, and so that's not necessarily childish in the sense. So the word childish might be a little misleading. It's literally the genitive, the things of a child, of a minor child, say. And so it's opposed to teleoi, and that's a more advanced understanding of knowledge. So again, Paul compares the miraculous gifts to childish things, or the things that had to have guidance. The minor child had to be guided, and the church had to be guided by miraculous gifts in the early stages of the church. And that's what he's saying. Whereas whenever that which is perfect has come, whatever that which is perfect is, it replaced the gifts. And so this will help us to see what it might be. Today, we don't have to have the miraculous gifts. We have something that replaces them and is even better. Now, someone says to me one time, well, I sure wish we had prophets in the church. Well, we got something better. We got the words of the prophets already and the full, complete will of God. We don't need prophets anymore. We just need somebody who's going to study and properly interpret the New Testament that the prophets and the apostles gave us. So they needed the miraculous gifts to make decisions, and we study the scriptures to make our decisions today. Now that means we have to work at it. I think we can learn wisdom from the scriptures. I believe that we can providentially get wisdom too. But I think the scriptures themselves, if we'll apply them and study them and see how the decisions were made by God, that we can gain wisdom from the scriptures. Any comments there? I'm not denying providential wisdom, okay? Go ahead, James.
I was going to ask for the distinction between napios and paideon.
Well, one of them is a physical thing, and the other one is more of a legal thing. I think napios is a legal, it's more legal, a minor in a legal sense.
Okay.
He's not able to legally make his decisions. Or paidios is it's physically young.
Okay,
right?
Thank you. Yep.
So that's how I view the difference. Now, the church needed the right gift to make their decisions, and we studied the scriptures to make our decisions today. Some manuscripts have a different word order in this verse. In the majority text, the words are the same words, just a different word order. But that's no big deal. I don't see a problem with that. But I think the majority text is probably the correct text. It changes the emphasis, doesn't change anything else, is all it changes. One of the rules, or canon is a rule in Greek, of textual criticism, the most difficult reading is to be preferred. And the most difficult reading, what they call an abnormal word order, a word order different than the normal word order, is rejected by the normal word order. In this passage, the 28th edition didn't follow that rule. All right. So they actually went against their own rule. I think they had a preconceived notion. Okay. I translated when I was being a minor child, I went ahead and added the word minor to it. I was speaking as a minor child. I was feeling as a minor child. I was thinking as a minor child. Now I become a man. You say, I'm not a minor anymore. I can make my own decisions. Now, of course, a man will make wise decisions, hopefully. And so in this context, the minor child needs help in making his decisions. And now at this point, whenever that which is perfect has come, well, whatever that which is perfect is, then he can make his own decisions. And he's put away those minor things, the things of a minor child. minor child, and I footnoted it, and you can see at the bottom of the page, is or one who's unable to legally speak for himself, and so it is 5 times in this verse. Questions or comments?
Yeah, I'll throw in a brief comment. It's interesting, you and I both translated the I have become a man. And a number of translations said when I became a man. And the difference, that would seem to me to be an Aorist translation, when I became a man, versus the perfect, which is the translation, I have become a man, and the Greek has the perfect. So I was a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, I went ahead and gave it a literal translation. I can see why they said, I can see how why they translated it that way. He's setting forth a principle here, and the principle is the minor child versus the mature adult, and so the perfect hadn't come yet whenever Paul wrote this. And so that's why they didn't go with my translation, I have become a man. But he's talking about at the point when I have become a man, then I have put away these childish things. So at that point, I think he's given us a principle by which we can interpret the passage. A minor child, and that when I have become a man, then I put away those things. That's why I rendered it that way. And that's a literal translation, as you pointed out there.
Thank you.
Does that help a little? Or
yes, very much so. Appreciate your comment.
Okay. Let's try verse 12 now. And back to Chris, but I've forgotten who read last.
Yeah, it's me. I have a Blepomen, Gar, Arte, Ade, Eso Paturo, in Aion a Gematai, Tote, De, Prosopone, Prosopone, Arte, Genosko, Ek, Marus, Tote, De, Epigenosomai, Kathos, Kai, Epigenos, Thane. I have, for now we see through a dim mirror or dimly mirror, but then face to face. Now I know in part or out of the part, but then I will fully know even as I am known.
Okay. Our mirrors will mislead you on this thing because our mirrors, we have a polished surface. We put glass on the front of it. We cover that surface with something like silver and then cover it with a glass in front of it. And so that's what a modern mirror is. And the surface is machined to a very smooth surface. And you get a very good image on the mirror. So the problem we get into is we see the word mirror. And how did you render that? King James American Standard has darkly. That's in an enigmata.
I think I put dimly.
Dimly. That's
dimly.
I think that's good. And that comes pretty close to saying exactly what he meant with their mirrors. See, their mirrors were polished surfaces, hand polished, and they wouldn't be smooth, totally smooth. And so it's a surface that's honed like a machine honed modern time, but theirs were hand done with hand. Somebody rubbed a brass mirror, a piece of a brass surface. It was probably brass, and they rubbed it until it was smooth as they get it by hand rubbing. And yet, when you put it up and look, there was always a little bit of imperfection in that surface. So the image would not be as totally clear as, not even near what our modern mirrors are. So people, when they hear the word mirror, they don't get the point of it because they got to think of that surface that is not real smooth. I don't know. I can't think of a surface that would give you a bad image unless it's something that's like a piece of metal that's a little bit rough or irregular in its shape, smoothness. Am I making sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Hope I am. That's the problem with the word mirror. And the King James says glass, and it wasn't even a glass. It was, and that's the word for a mirror back in the King James when it was translated. But again, it was a polished metal surface that was irregular. So when you saw it, it was kind of unclear. Now, what was your word again? Unclear.
I put dimly.
Dimly. That's pretty good. Unclear. I fit it as well. And of course, King James American Standard say darkly. Darkly doesn't catch the full thrust, but it's pretty good. But that's why we need to understand it. Don't compare it to modern mirrors. That's the problem. And so what I see is kind of a irregular shape. It's kind of fuzzy, or it's kind of, how would I say the word? It's a bit distorted. I guess distorted would be, the image is distorted somewhat, right? But then, see, and so now is when you have the miraculous gifts, see? So the word now is a time when the gifts were there. And so that's when you're a minor child, see? So he's on to another figure now. And so it's like a mirror, but their mirror would give you a distorted image, not clear. Darkly, King James American Standard, that's okay. And but then, so then is when you become a man, or when the manhood comes. That's when the miracles cease or end. You have face to face. You have a clear image. With all of the New Testament in written form, we have a clear image now of the truth. We don't have to have prophets to guide us anymore. We have their messages all written down. Everything God wanted us to know is in the 27 books we know is in the New Testament. Right? Of course, the 39 books had already been written at this time. Some of the New Testament had been written when Paul wrote 1 Corinthians. Of course, 1 Corinthians had been written, but he's dealing with people that had trouble over gifts. And he's telling them that these are not near as important because they're going to end. Right? And any comments there now? So I'm going to see face to face. So, with this distorted mirror or polished metal surface, I see it in an enigma. And that's something that's unclear. Now let's go down to the word enigma. Enigmati. And that's right down here. Darkly, that's in an enigma. An obscure saying, an obscure thing. So it's something that's obscure. The word rendered glass here in the King James used on any surface sufficiently smooth and irregular to reflect rays of light uniformly. Images of objects actually in front of it appear to the eye as if they were behind it. Mirrors in biblical times were seen metallic. Hence the Revised Version, that would be the American Standard Version. RV is the English Revised Version, and the American Standard was almost the same as that translation. That was the British version of the American Standard. There's some differences, but it adopts a more general term mirror. That's fine. Because mirrors were polished metal, then at that time one could not see his image clearly. It's a serious mistake to compare the mirror to this first or modern day mirrors. Right? But then, see, so then now we've gone back to the manhood time when the gifts have ceased. But then, face to face, all right, it's like you're seeing something, you're seeing the face of somebody, face to face. So the contrast is between the metallic mirror with irregular surfaces It had an unclear image and to actually seeing face to face. But our modern day mirrors don't depict what Paul is using to illustrate his point, because our modern day mirrors, we see a clear image. So a modern day mirror is going to mislead people. They're not going to see the full thrust of what Paul is saying. Then face to face. All right. Now, what? I know what? Now, see, the word now is when the gifts are still in existence, which they were when Paul was speaking. And then is in the future when that which is perfect has come. Now, I know this is gnosko. I know in part, or out of the partial, say, same word we had earlier. The elementary knowledge is gnosko, emanates from miraculous gifts. All right? Then we have epignosis and gnosis differ. Gnosis is the noun form of this word right here, and there's the verb form of the same word. Right? And so he says epignosis, epi is upon, so that's knowledge upon knowledge, is what that is. And it's first knowledge of matter. Gnosis is in bringing me better acquaintance with the thing I knew before. And so epignosis is beyond that first knowledge. Gnosis is the first knowledge. Epignosis is the more complete comprehension of something. So it's more thorough. And so he says, in part, but then that's when the perfect comes. I shall now we have epignosis. So you got to know these two words, and so the American Standard says know fully, and so it says I shall know fully, and so in part I shall know even as I am known, as I was fully known. See, fully known is a better rendering than am known, like the King James. So the fully known gets you a better thrust of it. American Standard does a better job here. Fully known. Because it's epignosko. See, right now, let me break the word apart and you see what I'm talking about. There's your gnosko, that's elementary knowledge, and the epi on it is like knowledge upon knowledge. And so that's more emphatic, that's a greater, more in-depth knowledge, more thorough knowledge. And even as also I was fully known. And that's from epignosko also. See? All right. All right. Any questions or comments there?
Would you?
We missed that in the English translation. Go ahead.
Would you say that on that interpretation that the gifts such as prophecy was guiding the church, but was really aimed at giving them a basic knowledge of how the church worked and its purpose, and when the scriptures were canonized, then they had a deeper understanding?
Yeah, because the prophets didn't give everything at once. They gave some, and then they gave some more, and they gave some more. Revelation. So revelation came in stages, like in stages. And so basically, if you go through the book of Acts, you can see this. God had a pattern for them. He laid out a basic pattern, and then he began to flesh it out. And I can see this with the apostles. He told them in the Great Commission, I call it the Apostolic Commission, to preach the gospel to the whole world, but they didn't get it. And even Peter preached in Acts 2:38, 39. And to you, verse 39, for you is a promise to your children, to all that are far off. That includes Gentiles, see. And see, he still didn't get it. Peter said it, but didn't understand it fully. And so there had to be that growth process where he finally came to the realization, and God had to give him a vision 3 times, repeated in Acts 10, to get him over the hump, if you please, where he finally saw that the gospel was going to be to the Gentiles as well. But I think God was giving them time. And I go back to the 9th chapter of Daniel. There was a week, and that's called a week in the translation. But the Jews divided their years into 7-year cycles, Sabbath years. So it's literally, it says 70 weeks, and it's 77s. 70 of them would be more accurate Hebrew translation. So it's a 7-year cycle, and the Jews understood that. That's we just say decades, and they would say Sabbath year cycles. Okay, and that's how we measure our time in decades, and they measure in Sabbath or 7-year cycles. So there's a little bit of difference. So in this 7-year period, Messiah is going to make his covenant with many, not all Jews, but many. And he did that in the midst of the week. Messiah is cut off. That's after 3.5 years. That's the middle of a 7-year period. So Jesus' personal ministry was 3.5 years. He's cut off. He's sacrificed. He is crucified. And then 3 more years, they still didn't get it in their mind to preach to Gentiles, and God had to work miracles. And the tongue speaking, we'll see this in chapter 14, I can't remember what verses it was. I gave them earlier. But we'll see it. It's a quote of the Old Testament. The tongue speaking that they had in Acts 10 was a sign to the unbelieving Jews. We'll come to that and when we get into chapter 14. And so that convinced them. So they had to go through this growth process, even though they had miraculous guidance. Am I making sense now?
Yes.
And God was tolerating it. I mean, he knew they had to. But I think the 7 years of the Jews being the only ones to have it got more of the Jews out of Judaism and into becoming Christians than it would have if it had just gone straight to everybody at the beginning. I think the Jews would have rebelled to it. They needed to grow a bit and get some of their racial bias out of their heads, out of their thinking. I hope I'm making sense.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I translated, for now we see by means of a mirror darkly. And let's see what I said here. By means of, or in a mirror, in an enigma, or by an enigma. Okay. And so that's an enigma. But then, and so now is when we were children, say minor children. Then when you're adults, that's when you see face to face. Now, no in part, that's back to when you're a minor child, when they had gifts. But then back to the time when the gifts end. I shall know fully. See, that's epigenosko over here. That's our word here. Epigenosko. And there's epigenosko again. And so we have the epigenosko twice. I know fully as I've fully known. So it's elementary knowledge, mature, full knowledge. Okay. That's why I like that word fully, not fully, no fully. Translated it that way. Any comments there? The American Standard, I think, does it that way, no fully. And I went with the American Standard. I think it's more revealing and clarifying. It clarifies it better. All right. Any questions? Let's see if we can finish verse 13, and then we'll get next week. I don't know. Got a bunch here. Why don't we just call a halt to it and do verse 13 next week? Is that all right, fellas? It's our fourth.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Let's do that next week. And let me encourage you, if you have my Holy Spirit Volume 2 book, read the chapter on that which is perfect. That will be helpful. If you don't have it, I'll send an electronic copy of it to you right now. Okay. Do you both have it?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's study that before next week, and we'll kind of wrap this up with verse 13, and try to get it clarified. Okay. All right, fellas.
Good.
Good having you in class. I hope it was helpful.
Yes,
It
sir.
was. Yes, thank you.